YouTube. This is Bill McFadden from Tone Pure Music, and this is part 2 of the exposition of Metropolis Ark 3, and it's primarily strings and woodwinds. So we'll go ahead and start with the first multi, which is the high strings articulations, and the first one is staccato. Second we have is upbeat single. And now we have the upbeat single cluster. And ricochet. And here we have the crescendo short, crescendo mid, crescendo long. And then we have the decrescendo short. And decrescendo long. And the next multi we have is the high strings cluster. So here you have the heft note down, similar to the ones we saw in part 1. And then we have the staccatissimo cluster. And the upbeat single cluster. And the upbeat triplet cluster. Ricochet cluster. And the half down cluster. And here we have the staccato cluster. And the upbeat single cluster. And the upbeat triple cluster. And ricochet cluster. And the next multi we have is high strings repetitions. So here we have the repetition for the half note. Whoops. Quarter note. Quarter triplet. Repetitions with the 8th note, and here we have the 8th note triplet. And 16th notes. And 16th note triplets. And the next multi we have high strings cluster repetitions. Starting with E3. And then we have repetitions. Quarter note, that was half note, quarter note. And then eighth note. Eighth note triplet. And then repetitions with 16th notes. Repetition with 16th note triplets. And then the next multi we have staccato, and now we're in low strings. And you'll notice that in this library there aren't sustains in general. You would have to get the Metropolis Ark 1 or 2 to get your sustains. So there's your staccatissimo, upbeat single. And upbeat triplet. Ricochet. And then your crescendo short. Nice. And crescendo mid. Crescendo long. Decrescendo short. Decrescendo long. And next we have longs again, this time atonal multis. So the first one is half note down, which we've seen quite a lot of. And staccato cluster. Maybe staccatissimo cluster. And here we have upbeat single cluster. And upbeat triple cluster. Ricochet cluster. And half note down cluster. And here we have a staccato cluster. It's a little higher than. And an upbeat single cluster. And upbeat triple cluster. So a lot of special effects in this library. So it's going beyond our normal articulations by far. And so here we have repetitions, half note. So as long as you hold the key down, it continues to repeat. We can go to quarters. Quarter note triplets. Eighth notes. Eighth note triplets. 16th notes. and 16th note triplets. By the way, we're using the a little bit of close and a little bit of the tree, or basically the tree and close mics, which is basically I'm just playing the mic positions that come out of the box. And the next one we have is low strings tempo atonal. The first one is repetition, half note, cluster. Then we go on the quarter note, cluster, repetition. So again, as long as you hold the note down, you get the repetition. And then we have the fourth note triplet cluster. Then eighth note. Eighth note triplet cluster. And now we have the 16th note cluster. And the 16th note triplet cluster. And the next multi we'll take a look at is the Woodwinds, and this time we're starting with staccatissimo. And we have upbeat single. And upbeat triplet. Forte piano, decrescendo. So in this library, we do have a lot of decrescendos and crescendos. So in that sense, it's sort of a sustain kind of a patch. But if you just want a regular sustain, again, you have to go to the Metropolis Ark 1 or 2. And I've outlined those patches in my previous 2 videos. So here's a crescendo short. Crescendo medium. Crescendo long. Decrescendo short. Decrescendo long. And next we have Woodwinds, atonal multis, starting with the half note down. And the staccato cluster, or staccatissimo cluster. And now we have the upbeat single cluster. Upbeat triple cluster. Four-day piano cluster. Sort of like a marcato. Long marcato. And then we have the half note down cluster. staccato cluster, and the upbeat single cluster, and the upbeat triple cluster. And we have the forte piano cluster. So it fades out, decrescendos. So it's like a marcato with a long attack, or sorry, a long tail, or a long sustain. And then the next multi we have is high woodwinds tempo. So the first one we have is the half note repetitions. Quarter note. Quarter note triplet. Eighth notes. Eighth note triplets. And 16th. And then we have the 16th notes. Sixteenth note triplets, sorry. And then the last patch we have for this part of the second part of the Metropolis Ark 3 is high woodwinds atonal, starting with the repetition. So there's your repetition with the half note. Then we have the quarter note repetition with the cluster. And it's repeated. So as long as you hold the key down, then it continues to go. And then we have the quarter note. And then we have the repetition eighth note cluster. Eighth note triplet. So you don't really need to do more than one note unless you want a complex cluster. And then we have repetition 16th notes and then the last one is the 16th triplet. So that's the end of part 2 of Metropolis Ark 3 exposition. And the next part will come out tomorrow, possibly the last part, part 3. And this is Bill McFadden from Tone Pure Music. If you like this video, please click like. If you found it interesting, please click like and useful. And if you want to be notified and not miss any videos that come out, please subscribe. So this is Bill McFadden from Tone Pure Music, signing off.